Our next guest says President Trump's tax plan would put $4,000 into the pockets of working families. Joining me now, one of the people backing up that claim. He did the math. Kevin Hassett, chair of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. So when we saw that number, when the world saw that $4,000 number, can't be true. That's nonsense. That's rubbish. Would you go through the math with us and tell us how you arrived at $4,000 extra for working families?
Sure. You know, the basic problem, and hey, it's great to be back on the
right.
show. The first time as a government employee. Yeah. But, you know, as we've gone over the show over the years, over this math, over and over, it's basically just the case that right now U.S. firms put their jobs in Ireland, they put their activity in Ireland, they have the Irish subsidiary sell the product back into the U.S., and then the profits are in Ireland. We don't get any U.S. tax, and the Irish workers get the higher demand for their labor, and their wages go up. What President Trump wants to do is, reverse this offshoring model, have a low corporate tax rate here in the U.S., and encourage firms to locate their activity here. Once they do that, then that'll drive up the demand for workers and increase their wages. There's a big literature that looks at how lots of other countries have done the same thing and how their wages responded. And we take a very conservative edge of that literature, like the low-end estimates, apply the Trump tax plan to it, and get that it's going to increase wages for American workers by about $4,000.
Can I sum it up like this? If you look at foreign countries with a very low corporate tax rate, they've got a lot of jobs. They're expanding employment. Sure. If you look at foreign countries with a high tax rate on corporations, they don't produce as many jobs. That's the gist of your calculation, isn't it?
Yes, it absolutely is. And, in the report that we put out from the Council of Economic Advisors this week, right up near the top of the report, we have a chart where we looked at the recent wage growth experience of the 10 lowest tax OECD countries and the 10 highest tax OECD countries. Of course, we're in that sad second group. And the growth difference between our wages and the wages of low tax countries are just extraordinary. They're about 3% per year. And so if you take even half of that growth difference, then very quickly you get a pay raise that's much bigger than $4,000 over time.
But you have to drop the corporate tax rate to 20% or less before you get that $4,000 per working family advantage.
I think that every little bit helps, but I think that President Trump for the longest time wanted 15%, and I think there's a lot of sound analysis to support that. But 20% is a really good rate. It would have a dramatic effect on America's workers, and that's not just hypothesizing. It's not ivory tower models. It's hard facts. It's data. It's analysis. Lots of countries have done this. When they do, wages go up.
I want to ask you about what we heard a little bit about from the president about a week ago, I think it was, this idea of a tax holiday for corporations. Limited time, very, very low tax or no tax if you bring the money back from overseas. Is that part of the plan?
Right now, people in Congress are negotiating the final parts of the deal. But one of the things that they're going to have to figure out is what do we do with the $3 trillion or so dollars that are sitting offshore? How do we treat that? Do we let people bring it all back at once or what? And that's something that is going to be worked out. But for sure, one of the solutions that people are talking about is having some kind of a fee that you charge once the bill is passed. And then after that fee is paid on that previously located abroad money, then you can bring the money home right away. And if we could get that money back here and then also have a low rate so people will want to be here for other reasons, then the impact on the economy and on the welfare of ordinary Americans could be enormous.
That's the biggest growth item in the whole plan. Regardless of cuts for individuals, regardless of ending certain deductions, you bring that corporate tax rate down and you have a repatriation holiday, that's the biggest growth item in the whole plan, isn't it?
It's an enormous growth item. Whether it's the biggest, I would have to go to the blackboard a little bit and figure it out because on the individual side, there's the small business tax cut. And if you think about how much of American growth comes from the entrepreneurship of America's small businesses, then that's a serious item too. And we haven't even started talking about that right now. I mean, here on the show.
No, okay. We don't go deeply into the weeds here.
Yeah.
Let me just tell you this, Kevin, that at the moment, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 136 points, 23,133, and I think it's got a lot to do with the likelihood, it is now a likelihood, that we get a tax cut by Christmas. Last word to you.
I think that we should watch closely the Senate vote this week because if the Senate passes a budget deal that makes a space for a tax reform, then the markets are right to think that a tax reform becomes very, very likely.